music or story is the most effective way to communicate a message. Where I think people get it wrong is a couple of things. One, I think people care from a story perspective more about your why than your what. I want to understand your values and your origin and the dent you're trying to make in the world.
All right, today our guest is Chris Kneeland. We're going to talk about marketing, cult marketing, and what that is, and how brands are doing it today, and how brands have done it forever, and why brands have such a high staying power for who they are, and how some brands maybe are falling by the wayside, and where storytelling might make sense or might not for your brand or for any brand out there. So we're going to dig into that and in content and what we do as well, and see how those two mix. So Chris, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to meet you both. I'm looking forward to spending a few minutes with each other.
So our background, video production. I own a video production company, and Dan and I film together, and we've made documentaries and other things. So we do content storytelling for marketing.
Love it. I'm a fan and opinionated about what people are doing, good or bad in that. In fact, I just had a really fascinating phone call with a YouTube influencer that's doing long form content, 200 million views a month, and it's just like, but he has 50 employees. It blew my mind.
That's crazy.
Yeah, goes into producing something that kind of looks unproduced, right? I think that they don't. It's not Survivor, right? It's not, but yet it's still. I mean, obviously, Mr. Beast is at the top of that pyramid, but it was a really interesting peek into how it actually happens.
And is that where YouTube's kind of turning? Is long-term content? Because I mean, they're doing their shorts, they're doing all of that, but
I don't know that I don't know what YouTube's strategy is. I think that content creators have found YouTube to be the most conducive to long form versus say TikTok, but the most lucrative. I mean, it's nearly a 50-50 rev share split on the ads, which you can make a lot of money that way. And so I know that we wearing my Spike Ball hat need to do a lot better job.
Love Spike Ball.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like I say, Spike Ball is a client that I'm spending a disproportionate amount of time on right now, and it's been an absolute blast. And we just hit 100 million views for Q1. Like we're getting a lot of views, but it's all happening on Instagram and TikTok. And I'm trying to find ways to become much more relevant on YouTube. And then I'm sure we'll end up talking about The Gathering as well. That's another place where I feel like we're just missing the boat on what should be happening on YouTube.
I think
oh, my bad.
With Spike Ball too, it's like, it feels like it's in that cult brand following. I don't know. Does it feel like?
Well, that's where, I mean, I've been advising businesses I've been on the agency side for maybe 15 years now. No, that's not true. Since 2005, so almost 20 years now. I can count on, for sure, two hands, maybe one hand, the number of clients that I've consulted with that I would ever consider going full time with or doing something beyond just consulting. In our world right now, we're calling that fractional CMO, where you're kind of hired as their CMO, but you're giving them a percentage of time. So I'm giving Spike Ball 65% of my time right now. But very few brands you need to be cult-like. You need to have all the raw ingredients of a business that aligns with my ideology around what makes a business cult-like versus just a normal or mediocre business. But then you also get into the leadership structure, you get into the growth ambitions, you get into the team, the culture there, and it's very rare I think, to find a business. So you're like, yeah, I could work here. Most of the time, you're like, I'm very grateful for the chance to work with you. This has been a very fun project, but I would never spend 40 hours a week going into that office and working with those, within that. Typically, it's the leadership that, and you throw in private equity or Wall Street, and now you're servicing different masters. I'm always a fan of privately held businesses that are doing, I think, the right things for the right reasons. That just aligns with my personal ambitions.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about YouTube too is I feel like you can create a bigger cult-like following by creating the content that leads into something that people want to consume. So it's I think on our end, we're seeing a lot of long form becoming more wanting to be consumed, I think, because people want something real. I think they're sick of being sold things. And I think, do you think that like this storytelling, I mean, Liquid Death, for instance, they have a really strong stance in the space that they're in, and they do a type of storytelling. They tell these wild, outrageous stories through skits. Do you think that more of the branding will follow suit and be more of this storytelling space versus the like quick hit transactional stuff?
Probably not. I think Liquid Death is so amazing to people because it's so exceptional, both meaning really, really good, as well as it's the exception. It's not the rule.
Right.
That novelty creates a lot of buzz. I mean, when you go to understand how Liquid Death does what Liquid Death does, they don't think of themselves as a marketing department. They actually think of themselves like an SNL writing room.
Right.
And they're putting together, their goal is to win the internet whatever day they go live. And there's just very few C-suites that sit around asking themselves, how can we win the internet today?
Sure.
Ask themselves, how can we sell more stuff today? And they don't have either the knowledge or the patience to connect those dots. So, and I actually, going back to the idea of YouTube, Liquid Death's content is sort of chemically engineered to thrive on Instagram and TikTok.
Right.
When I think of YouTube, I think of hot ones, right? And episodic shows where people are regularly returning. I do yoga every morning from a woman that's giving me a 20-minute yoga flow on her YouTube channel. I can there's a person that I subscribe to that does faith-based and scripture-based study. Obviously, you've got Mr. Beast and the Dude Perfects of the world, and so I think that I think what you're seeing is there's people that just want to create content and then they're finding ways to monetize it with brands versus brands that are saying, let's create content and find a way to make it cool and digestible. Occasionally it happens, but I go back to even some of the amazing brand work that Dove has done with Real Beauty. It's not episodic content. It's still just, it's a 6-minute clip or it's a 3-minute clip, which is long form if you're thinking about a 15-second or a 30-second commercial. But it's not like they're doing something every week where I need to tune back in order to really become a big Dove fan.
Yeah. And on that topic, did you see the Sephora thing on Hulu? How they did episodes for Sephora and they used famous musicians?
I did not.
Yeah, you should check that out. So they basically took 3 famous musicians and had them do like kind of like a makeup tutorial of like how they wear their makeup on stage, but it was filmed in episodes and it's on Hulu. It was an interesting take on episodic content. I don't know how well it did for analytics, but it was cool to see a brand pushing into that space.
I mean, again, we, as both content creators, which you guys are, and as marketers, which I am, like I remember being on a plane a couple months ago and seeing the YouTube or the Yeti short films that I saw at like Sundance Film Festival on on the screen, on the seat in front of me, where you could watch those. And I had no idea what it costs to get Delta to put your branded content on their, their in-flight entertainment channel. But it's, at the one end, you have like the Barbie movie, or, what's coming out right now, Minecraft. Back in the day, I got to know a little bit about the team that did the Lego movie, right? Like, you can do some amazing Hollywood blockbuster kind of long form content, and 0.001% of all brands would even have a brand or a story that would make that relevant, right? On the other end, I'd put things like stunts. This is where Red Bull thrives. This is where Hot Wheels thrives. And it's just, let's just go do something that's really, really entertaining. And there's a live component to it. There's an advertising component to it. There's a content story to it. I like when Hot Wheels did the real life loop to loop.
Yeah.
Because I used to play with that as a child. I don't think they went into that thinking this is going to be a 25-minute show on YouTube. I think they were like, let's build a real life thing. And then they had the savviness to say, and we should record the making of, because that too could be really entertaining. And there's an element of danger, and there's an element of celebrity and all that kind of stuff. So I think it all comes back to like, what was the brief to begin with? And then you can start to measure success. If success for Hot Wheels was, I got to see if we can actually do a real life loop to loop. If that was the success, how many views the video gets is secondary. That's extra credit, right? As opposed to Red Bull would say, no, we're going to break the internet today. We're going to get 100 million people watch this guy jump out of outer space. But, that was a CEO founder that wanted that to happen. That wasn't the marketing department saying, what would be cool is let's drop a guy out of space. And so those are hard ideas to pitch and to get funded unless you have an owner or a leader that's just trying to, do something that's, he's a quirky guy. He's more interested in Formula One, it seems like. Red Bull is just his cash cow to fuel his Formula One passion kind of thing. So those are exceptions, not the rule. So it's really hard for fans of that. If you're working at Lululemon or Ford or GoPro, and you're like, well, why can't we do more stuff like that? It's because you don't have that leader. That leader is the one that's allowing and driving some of those decisions.
Yeah. In today's world, starting a company, I guess, not a brand, but starting a company seems like so quick and easy now. We have all the tools to do it. But creating a brand, and even a cult-like brand, what does that take? Because you can create a company tomorrow and launch your website and everything, but what does it take to create something like a cult-like brand?
You may not like this answer given what you guys do for a living, but I am worried that we have too many entrepreneurs spend way too little time on their product and their business, and way too much time on their narrative and on their story, thinking that if I can just package this thing in a super compelling way. And we see examples of it. I mean, you can see a celebrity, pick any of the Kardashians. You can say that they are parlaying their fame into potentially something that's pretty average. Now, I actually think Skims is actually pretty cool as a legitimate competitor to Spanx. So I don't want to broad brush it and say everything they do is garbage, but there's no shortage of celebrities that have a pretty mediocre tequila brand, or a pretty mediocre apparel brand, or a pretty mediocre cosmetics brand. And they're just cashing in on affinity that has been built through other means. I like their music. I like their movies. I think they're beautiful, whatever it might be. So you get let's take all of that off the table. If we're now just talking about an average schmuck that thinks that he has a better idea, I always tell people, I do a lot of teaching with college kids, and I think if you're going to be an employee or be an entrepreneur, that's a fork in the road sort of decision. if you're choosing to be an employee, I give them some advice that I heard from Elon Musk many years ago. When somebody asked Elon, what's the secret to his entrepreneurial success? And he said, when we set out to build Tesla, we were not trying to make a 20% better Prius. We were trying to make a 200% better car. And Tesla has spent next to $0 on its storytelling or on its advertising because it spends all of its energy on building something that is inherently remarkable, defined by, you're going to remark about this. And whether it's a legitimate thing, like the cars, it looks like a space capsule inside, whether it's a promise of some future thing like autonomous driving, or whether it's a super stupid thing like the whoopee cushion feature that makes it sound like somebody farted in the back seat, right? All of that goes into marketing in my mind, which makes nobody compare a Tesla to a Prius. And yet, and pick a category. I like to always think about food. I've got, I don't know, a dozen burger joints within 10 miles of my house. No one of them is 200% better than the other. And there's a strip mall where every 18 months, their burger joint's gone out of business and a new concept has gone in. And it's sad. It takes a lot of capital. I'm sure somebody's dream just got crushed. But it was like, guys, what were you expecting? There's no shortage of places to get hamburgers around here. So just saying this is my grandma's recipe isn't going to make people inherently choose you. You have to have a different angle, and it shouldn't be superficial. It should be substantive. There's a meaningful reason. And particularly in America, where you can go to the grocery store and see 18 ranch dressings on the aisle, who's thinking, you know what we're missing is a 19th option of ranch. They should have thought that when we got to the 4th option or the 5th option or the 6th option. So there's just way too much mediocrity. And I think the problem is, as many businesses have realized, we're pretty mediocre. So can we bolt something onto it, like brand purpose or storytelling or celebrity endorsement? Can we find something that would allow us to be perceived as different because there's actually no fundamental difference? I think it's a strategy, but I would just prefer to take that money and actually be better. Give me something that will legitimately be head and shoulders above what everybody else has got on the current, or get out. Like I said, in first world countries, there's still just too much choice. If you really loved ranch dressing, why don't you just go work for Paul Newman's company or Kraft or one of the companies that's already there? Why the hubris to think, no, the world needs my version of it, right?
Yeah, I think it's tough because even when you talked about Tesla earlier, it's like Tesla almost went bankrupt a couple times, and it would be great to spend all your money on the product and have it win. But just like you said a minute ago, like it doesn't always happen and you might not win. You're spending all your time. Like you have to do marketing. Like Billie Eilish came out with her perfume. My daughters love it and, wanted it for Christmas and all this stuff. It's like a little bottle of like a body, half a body or something. And it's just a product. It's just a celebrity putting their name on a product and it's selling just like the Kardashians. But it's like, what's new about that? But you're marketing it towards kids. You're marketing it towards young girls and they're buying it.
Yeah, that's where I would say Billie Eilish is not selling perfume. Billie Eilish is selling smell like Billie Eilish. She's selling her brand, and she's just doing a nice job monetizing it through a variety of different ways. If you were to blindfold people and have them smell 10 perfumes, nobody would choose Billie Eilish's because that was the best one. It would just be, I want to be affiliated with that brand, which is, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm just saying what you can't do is be a fragrance manufacturer and say, well, shoot, why are people buying Billie Eilish's and not mine? We need to go back and reformulate. Like, they're not competing in the perfume business. She's just monetizing her brand, and it happens to be encroaching in your territory. So if you were a upstart, hotshot MBA kid that wanted to get into perfume, I'd say, why? Why are you going into this super competitive, crowded space? What's your angle going to be? And if your angle isn't, well, I'm best friends with Billie Eilish, so I'd say, well, then maybe go find something else to spend your talent on, because the world doesn't need another fragrance.
Yeah. Do you think that within the storytelling space, though, where is storytelling valid? Is it only for the brands that already have the product that is really successful, or is it really about keeping up and telling product story versus like building a wrapper around a company and being like, this is our story and what we stand for?
I have a lot of respect for the value of as a species. Story is the single story or song, music or story is the most effective way to communicate a message. Where I think people get it wrong is a couple of things. One, I think people care from a story perspective more about your why than your what. I want to understand your values and your origin and the dent you're trying to make in the world more than I want you to merchandise the features and benefits associated with whatever it is you're selling. And so sometimes people get confused, particularly the more technical or sciencey you are. They want to get into the jargon and the genius. I think the greatest story I ever heard about that is the difference between Monster headphones, which was a couple $100 million business where the founder was so in love. He was an audiophile. He was so in love with the technology that delivered the sound to your head that purists, music lovers that really wanted premium sound gravitated towards Monster headphones. And it was a successful business. I mean, nobody's sad making a couple $100 million a year in revenue.
Yeah.
If Johnny Ivy comes along and says, listen, your technology is great, but I'm going to slap a Dr. Dre endorsement on this thing, and I'm going to start tapping into rapper lore. I'm just going to make them the coolest thing to own. And the fact that there's some wired copper thing in there that does something better than an aluminum copper thing, who the hell cares?
True.
And that $200 million business becomes a multiple billion-dollar business known as Beats by Dre, right? That was just storytelling, because now it helps that the product was really good. If Beats by Dre headphones were garbage, nobody's going to spend $400 for them. But that's storytelling, because that was tapping into I'm now not just buying music because it sounds good. This is again, and they're bright red and they're white, and they're different colors. You guys have these very tasteful black headphones on today. So I think that's probably one of the best examples I've ever heard of story adding billions to annual revenue.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're taking the product and wrapping the story around it, but the story is so good because of who it's for. And
yeah, and you take something like Yeti, which I think Yeti's masterful. I think they think of their stories as gifts to their community. You love surfing. We love surfing. Let's do surfing stuff together. And that lends an authenticity that makes them valuable or makes them invited into that community. It could be bull riding. It could be fishing. I think story is a really great way to say we get you and we honor you. And people like to know that brands are part of them. I'm fascinated with like Wrangler jeans. Like, how did Wrangler become the jean for the cowboy and the rodeo and the Western crowd? And it was because of all of the authentic things that they did. They didn't force their way in there. They were like, let us serve you, the community, and then the community then in turn reciprocates.
See, when I look at Yeti, I look at a company who is not showing their product in the commercial as marketing. It's just like kind of in the background. And I see that as a cool way to promote your product. I'm not looking at it as like, oh, they love surfing, they love fishing, because they're kind of all over the board when they're when they have all their, they have so many videos of different stories out there. But I look at it as a creative way to promote your product without promoting your product, if that makes sense.
Where people can't help themselves, and again, it comes down to, I think, Yeti's genius of their leadership team is brands, for the most part, and when I say the most part, I probably mean 90%, cannot help themselves but I didn't see my product enough. I didn't see our logo enough. There wasn't a call to action. How are consumers ever going to connect the dots that was us? And it's like, give owners some credit. They're pretty smart. I remember BMW did it really well back in the day. They did some Guy Ritchie films. I think it was called The Heist. And, it was a movie, essentially. And it just happened to be, using the BMW as the getaway car. What Yeti understands is that they are not the hero of this movie. Right. They are a supporting actor. And so they should play that role and be in the background. And, if they just came out and said the day in the life of a Yeti cooler, nobody's tuning in for that. But because it's a real interesting story with all the things that story has, so there's a climax, there's some drama, there's a protagonist, there's, we don't need to figure out as a species how to tell good stories. We know that there are good, what we have to do is convince brands to not ruin good stories by being so insecure, by trying to over commercialize the element of, do you remember, you guys might be too young for this. Remember when Wayne's World first came out and there was that really funny segment of the over product placement? It's like, I've got a headache, and Garth is like, try these, and two aspirin, or then there's a Pepsi, there's a Domino's pizza. They were poking fun at the absurdity of product placement, because it's what I love about Range Rover. I think Range Rover, in fact, we gave them an award as one of the most cult-like brands of the decade. They just understood that if I can pay to do a 60-second or 30-second commercial, or if I can gift the James Bond franchise 12 Range Rovers, I'm going to get a much better ROI by becoming synonymous with beautiful people in beautiful locations doing high adventure things, by having James Bond tell that story, than by having a Range Rover commercial. And all they had to do was resist the temptation to say, but don't get it dirty, or we can't show it with mud on it, or we can't show it doing this thing. It's like, no, you're giving the storytellers permission to make the Range Rover a character in that movie, and you've given up your rights to say, but why did it crash, or why did it's like, because it's a story, and Range Rover was part of it. But it's if I'm in your business, your job is to find those enlightened few that have the courage and the budgets and the desire to do that kind of storytelling, because it's not the norm.
Yeah. And on that subject, how do you think, this is kind of a personal thing for what we do, but how do you think we would talk about what we do and make our production company more of a brand? Like, is that worth doing? Is that a thing? Because there's also so many of us. There's so many content creators. There's so many production companies. How do we separate ourselves by using story, besides just having a really great product and a great budget, or whatever it is, like better on pricing? Like, what is the thing that separates a production company?
Well, I mean, that's the question. What is your thing? I worry that production companies are a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
There's your ability to shoot images or edit or do good post-production is the least interesting thing. Like, I would hope so. I mean, you're doing this for a living. Like, if you're not good at shooting film, why are you doing it? I think every production company needs to get super niche. Back in the day, there was a lot of directors that were like, how do I break in? And I'm going to film, I'm going to be the next, Steven Spielberg or Martin. Yeah. And there was a really interesting on-ramp through music videos. It was, you needed to find, this is before YouTube and you could do your own, you needed to find a way to demonstrate your talent other than just a portfolio or, sending people a B-roll or whatever. And so they, maybe even Spike Lee, like some really very famous directors were like, I'm going to carve out a niche where I can do R&B or rap or country music, and I'm going to start to build a reputation in that space, and that will allow me to create connections and reputation that would parlay into other things. I think of production companies that we've used in the past. Like we're working with a company right now that their company is called 3 Second Media, and their whole shtick is, in a TikTok world, you've got 3 seconds to decide if somebody's swiping or not swiping. So we're going to specialize in front loading whatever it is that you've got to say in the first 3 seconds. Now, does that mean they can't do a 10-minute long form thing? No, it just means that their angle is for businesses that want to monetize TikTok shops or grow their TikTok audiences. We're going to be better at playing that game than anybody else. There's a production company that we've used in the past whose whole shtick was, all of our talent is dispersed. Half of the budget typically is shipping people and equipment to locations, and they freelance all of that. So you're basically buying a director and a project manager, and then we were shooting in 7 cities, and I didn't have to deal with customs. I didn't have to deal with flights. They went and found local talent because, again, the belief was there's pretty good people that know how to shoot anywhere. What I need is somebody that knows my vision, understands my timeline, understands my brand, knows the brief, and then who's actually setting up the lights or doing the audio is irrelevant to me, right? So I do think that the riches are in the niches. And production companies can't just say, hire us, we do this and we do that and we do this. It's get uncomfortably narrow. It doesn't mean if somebody calls and says, I'm not sure if you do this or not. I get that a lot with my agency Cult. I get a lot of people that will call and say, I don't know if we're really cult worthy yet. And I don't mean cult worthy like my agency worthy, like cult brand worthy.
Right.
But I'm curious. It's like, of course, I could take them on as a client. I can break my own rule. It's like the whole point of positioning is to attract new business. Once you've attracted it, do whatever you want to do with it. Like pay your bills, pay your staff. And I think too many people think that if you exclude somebody, that you've somehow left some money on the table. And it's like, I like to tell our clients 80%, well, if you're super courageous, 80%, but at a minimum of 60% of people that go to your website should say, that's not for me. Because that means the 40 or the 20 in the perfect world would be like, oh, thank God I finally found somebody that's really good at this, because that's what I've needed to do. And now you don't have to do the RFPs. Now you don't have to worry so much about price sensitivity. It's like, I wasn't sure that people like you existed, and I'm so happy that you do. That's the audience that you need to try to attract.
That's a great point, to actually niche down that way where people turn away because you're not getting the inbound of, because we get that all the time. We get a lot of inbound of things like maybe we won't do, but it's because maybe we have a broader vision at the moment. So I think that's a really great point for anybody that's in content or even any businesses, that you want that 40% to be the one that knows what you're doing, because that makes you hyper focused.
I have a friend who does over $1 million, a 2-person shop. They do over $1 million a year. So not a big business, but a pretty good lifestyle business. Yeah. She's certainly doing better than she would if she was some employee somewhere. She's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and has a good life. She does Facebook ads for credit unions. Think about how niche that is. It's like she doesn't do all their social media.
Right.
She doesn't work for all financial institutions or anybody. She's like, if you're and what's the genius about that is credit unions tend to be very regional. So you can have lots of them. It's not like it's a big national brand where you run into non-compete issues. You could go into every city, basically. Wow. 300 cities are all going to have 1 or 2 credit unions in them. And none of them have huge paid media budgets. So it's not like they're running TV commercials. but all of them should be on Meta. And she's like, yeah, I'm just going to do your Meta. I'm going to optimize. And I can, whatever I learned from the New York credit union might apply to the Salt Lake City credit union, might apply. So it's like her competence about how to deal with these stakeholders, these industries, these customers is through the roof. She's an expert on how people are attracted to credit unions on social media. But some people are like, but I'm an artist and I don't want to just work with credit unions, or I don't just want to do. It's like, well, great. But then do you want to make $500,000 a year? It's like, pick your poison. Do you want to be a starving artist, or do you want to, scratch your artistic itches in your free time and have a really viable business?
Right. Which is another way to look at it. It's like, if you're running a business, the whole idea is to make money so that you can survive. It's not to make art necessarily. And so you should be able to make your art, but on the side. I like that. I mean, the credit union thing's great because it shows that you don't have to have this crazy idea and plan to go after a certain market. You just have to think about where you can niche down and how you can expand. I've never thought about the regional thing. We work with a couple banks and it's more global. But that makes sense because of the NDA non-compete thing. So, cool. I think the one thing that I also wanted to jump into too is the gathering. And this seems like, is it something that you think is just going to expand over time because of because I think what, 10,000 people, or there's a large amount of people. How do you take something like that and keep it? Are you going to keep it niche like that, or does it expand even larger because there are so many people that need this community?
It's a great question. A couple of things come to my mind when I think of the gathering. One is, in our earliest of days, let's assume year 3 or 4, as we realized that this was becoming a thing, we had a board of advisors, and one of the members of the board runs one of the largest marketing conferences on the planet. I'm going to avoid saying the name of it, but everybody would not only know it, everybody would want to have been there if they haven't already gone. And he said to us, if I could do it all over again, I would have kept it small, because it got so big that the pomp and circumstance that surrounds it now trumps the substance and the specialness of what it had started out to be. And I always think about that. I live here in Salt Lake City, and Sundance Film Festival Salt Lake just lost it, and it's now moving to Boulder, Colorado. Which
is crazy.
I think people that have never been or don't really know it don't understand why. It hasn't been in Sundance for decades. It had already overgrown. Sundance is a tiny little resort. I mean, I was just actually there this weekend. Robert Redford's theater seats 144 people. Wow. So it had already moved to Park City decades ago, and it had already expanded from Park City into Salt Lake, and there was nothing charming, or, the likelihood of actually bumping into a celebrity went away years ago as they get sort of black car drafted out there at some, rich Airbnb. And I was like, it's not like people are hanging. It's not what it was that made it what it was. It had gotten too big for itself. And so I actually don't think it's a huge loss that it's going to Boulder, because I don't think it's as special as it used to be. And I think that happens with most businesses. And one of the great, there's a great question, I think, from David Ogilvy or somebody, is the great question of business is, how big can you get before you get bad? And there is a tipping point, right? And I think that I really want to use my influence and my, seat at the board to try to keep the gathering intimate and special. Part of that is the destination. So doing something in Banff and particularly at the Fairmont Banff Springs, which is, my kids call it the Harry Potter Castle. Like, it's so intertwined with our brand right now, the way like a destination wedding would be. It's like, we're going to Banff to participate. That pilgrimage, which is intentionally inconvenient, is an automatic filter from the charlatans and the wannabes. Like, only the people with the purest of intentions and the biggest of ambitions and the boldest of dreams even bother, because it's weird. It's inconvenient. It's not in LA or Vegas or Chicago. And it's space constrained. I mean, that little villa town can only hold so many people. So when we get to the point that we're like, should we leave Banff because it's gotten so big? I will have been concerned, are we now chasing the money and forsaking the purpose of what it was supposed to be? Because there's an intimacy that happens there that is impossible to describe unless you've experienced it, that makes it my favorite 3 days of the year. I remember when Dana White came with the UFC, and he would have been one of the larger sort of celebrity like CEOs, and we weren't really sure, like, should we whisk him back to his VIP suite, and should we keep him in the green room? And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, I made a whole trek here. Let's go. Let's mingle. Let's be with the people. And it was just, and one, that was because he's a genuinely good dude. And two, it was like, I hate the conferences where the keynote flies in and flies out. And it's like,
right.
I came here not just to hear the canned remark for 60 minutes. We came here to connect.
Yeah.
And, some of my favorite professional relationships, I'm kind of crushing right now on Jesse Cole from the Savannah Bananas.
Oh yeah. His content is crazy.
And it wasn't me interviewing him on stage that made me a fan. It was me having dinner with him and his wife the night before and learning more about their story. And, those kinds of collisions, I think, don't happen at traditional conferences. And they didn't happen because I'm one of the organizers. It's because they're there for 3 days at the bar, at the bathroom, in the restaurant, sitting down. I mean, I love it when like Bill Neff, who's become a dear friend from Yeti, is on stage speaking, and then he comes and sits down to me to listen to the next speaker up. Like, when does that ever happen at a conference, right? It's like, I like that he's smart enough to give the keynote and humble enough to listen to a keynote, because he realizes there's still things that he wants to learn. So I think that only happens when you keep it contained to a certain size. Now, the other way that we can really grow the gathering, and we're doing, the Gathering podcast, the Gathering, we call them retreats. Let's do a little miniature meetup. We're actually doing one here in Sundance. We're doing one in Dallas next month. So trying to find ways to make the headliner act is the pilgrimage that happens for 3 days in Banff, but there could be some opening acts or other ways to consume and to create community that happen 365 days a year.
I like that, because you're bringing back more of the nature of like conversation too, and people being people, because like you said, there's a lot of these big events now, like HubSpot does one in Boston, which is down the street, and it's great, but it's so massive that all the people come in and same thing. They do their thing and they leave. And a lot of people go with the intention of hopefully crossing paths with some of these people in marketing and wanting to talk to some of these people. And most people just want a conversation. And it's just nice that people that have made it into these spaces will take the time and be a part of the community again, because maybe they realize, and maybe this is why they realized they were there once. Do you think that's part of it, is like they realize their path and they're willing to give back, like yourself?
Yeah, I've kind of got, I've talked with hundreds of these. I've been on the selection committee for 12 years now. So I like to think that my spidey sense is pretty fine-tuned when I'm speaking with a brand leader of what kind of leader they are and how cult-like or cult-capable their brand is. And I'd say one of the top 3 elements is generosity. There is a kindness and a generosity. When the opposite of that, which I would consider sort of posers or even assholes, is there's ego associated with, I was actually talking with somebody the other day. They were talking about it's a very large multi-billion-dollar company, and like their CMO is kind of considered like the celebrity that people get a glimpse of every once in a while, and they sort of really get off on this exclusivity and this eliteness, and they take the executive elevator to the executive floor, and they have the executive cafeteria, and they don't mingle with the rank and file, and they think that that's one of the perks of the job, is that there's a hierarchy here, and I don't have to associate with the unwashed masses. And it's like, those people, I'm sure they make great livings, but they're not our people. That's not the cult brand crowd. Are the cult brand crowd, and it's not just the leaders, it's the attendees as well. I think there's a spirit of, I'm coming to give, I'm not coming to get. That's why you don't see like people running around handing out business cards and let's do a deal together. The NFL and Big Brothers, Big Sisters sat at a dinner one night and said, we should be doing something together. That you have an influence and a responsibility at the NFL, and the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, they had a need, but that meeting was serendipitous. They didn't get together for drinks to ink a deal. They got together to talk about shared values and personal ambitions, and the CMO from the NFL actually joined the board because he also wanted to participate and scratch an itch that was more philanthropic. And I love seeing that happen because it's just, again, it goes back to good people trying to do good things for the right reason. And it's not that sleazy, let's wheel a deal and find a way to grease something together. And I think that's where the best creative collaborations come up, was when I was just listening to a podcast with Brandy Carlisle and Elton John. And like they didn't get together so that they could help the other person sell more records. They got together because it was a dream of theirs to be able to work with an idol that they had. And that, you could just see that mutual respect. And then what resulted is so much more desirable because it was done out of a pure reason versus something that was more selfish.
Yeah, I think we find that in creating too. I think when we create the best thing that we can as content creators and storytellers, it's usually when it's a combination of both brand and what we do coming together to create something, and sort of like a conversation in a way, and less of a transaction. The transactional stuff, I mean, yeah, it pays the bills, but it lacks that feeling, at least from my perspective. And so I think in that idea, we are having these conversations with brands by creating together, and that allows it to be more authentic.
Yeah, and so like I remember when we started Cult, we made a list of about 500 brands that we thought were dream brands. Many of them spent very little on advertising. I remember Lululemon was on the list at the time, $0 on advertising. Costco, $0. And it was like, that's a weird choice for a marketing services firm that typically gets paid to produce advertisements. And it was a super scary choice because if we weren't positioned as Cult, we could work with 50,000 businesses. Like anybody that needed a sign, an ad, a website, an event, we can do that, we can do that, we can do that. So to take our audience from 50,000 potential companies to 500 was terrifying. Like what happens if we don't do that? Now, it would be irresponsible if it was 50. I mean, 500 is still a pretty, we work on average with about a dozen clients a year. So that's a pretty good ratio. I didn't need to land 20% of them in order to pay the bills kind of a thing. I could get single digit percentage. But then out of pure sincerity, respect, adoration, it became much easier to talk to those 500 brands as, let me tell you why I think you're awesome, and let me tell you how I think I can help you, versus just, hey, do you have anything that you need done kind of a thing, right? So if you're in your guys' business, if there are certain brands that are telling the kinds of stories that you want to tell, you can court them so much more authentically and effectively than just, trying to let anybody that knows that anybody that needs a video, we've got equipment and some capacity right now, kind of an idea.
Right.
Your enthusiasm for what they're doing can become contagious. I love that. I'm working with Spikeball right now, as I mentioned, and we just hired a position, and it was a very average paying job. It wasn't like this super lucrative position. It was fair. But we got 50 people in a week saying, I would give my left arm to work at Spikeball. Like, I love that company, and that's what you want. You want
100%.
people that are that enthusiastic about working with you, and that the privilege of working with you is worth. I'll take a pay cut to go there. Again, I don't want to take advantage of it. I don't want to underpay the position, but I don't need to bribe people to come.
Yeah.
I don't need to pay a headhunter to go find somebody for me. It's like, if you build a brand that's desirable, people come up and say, I think I heard Yeti I think it's Yeti. They get like tens of thousands of unsolicited resumes. Hey, I'm not sure if you guys are hiring, but just in case, if you ever are, please include me in your consideration. Think about what a competitive advantage that is for them.
Yeah.
To be able to have instant access to top talent that are eager to work there that you don't have to overpay for.
But that's the thing. You've created an environment. You've created an atmosphere that people want to be a part of. It's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
All sides, whether you're inside the brand or outside the brand, you've created something that people love. And I think that's something that needs to come back more, because we've seen a lot of brands not do that are new. And I think creating that love of the brand is what keeps it alive.
How would you do that as a restaurant? Asking for a friend.
Dan owns a restaurant too.
Oh,
A restaurant that will attract. Yeah.
no, employees. Like, it's just, I would love for people to be like, oh, I want to work. I want to be a part of this. And we have a fun, it's a fun establishment, a fun place to work, but hard to keep employees.
I have a lot. We have a Mexican restaurant client. 45% turnover in the first 90 days. Think about what a huge drain that is to hire, find, hire, train, and then lose. Not only to now have to replace that person, but what does that do to the culture and the morale of the business? And I think rather than just accept that that's the way fast food is, or that's the way retail is, it's say, no, we're going to be very conscious about creating an environment where one of our competitive advantages is the average tenure of an employee is 2.5 years. But that means you have to change the hiring criteria. You're not just looking for summer college kids.
Right.
You're not just looking for people that need a job. You're looking for, some of them might need career pathing. Some of them might need longer term incentives like tuition reimbursement eligibility after the second year. Some of it, I think a lot of it is, I met my wife actually when we were waiting tables at TGI Fridays. And one of the brilliant things that TGI Fridays did was they had such standardized systems across the network that when we got married, we were dirt poor, and we would go on holiday. We'd want a vacation, but I couldn't afford to do a lot of vacationing. So Fridays said, you basically get this passport that you can go work at any Fridays in the country. So we could go home for 2 weeks for Christmas, and I could pick up 5 shifts at the Fridays in Philadelphia. Right. And they created essentially a contingent national workforce. I actually think restaurants should do that, where Fridays and Chili's and Applebee's should all cross train each other. Because what people really need in that space is flexibility.
Yeah.
And what you need is predictability, that I've got somebody opening the restaurant and closing the restaurant, but you may not care that they moonlight at other dishwashers. Like, what you need is an ecosystem of people that have chosen food service as a profession, and they want to be able to pick up shifts and lose shifts differently. I just think there's a lot of innovation that needs to get out of this perception that if you're going to work here, you're going to work 20 or 40 hours a week, and you're only going to do these jobs, and you're only going to do it at this location. And the person that figures that out Think about how many non-traditional workers there are. Maybe it's stay-at-home moms that need to pick up some shifts, or somebody that just got unemployed, or somebody that needs, to fill a 4-week gap. Like if you open yourself up to that, your labor model becomes a huge competitive advantage.
Love that. My head's spinning right now with ideas.
But it goes back to all of, everything I think we've been talking about, which is there's a real intentionality about what are we building and why are we building it. And if you stay true to that, I think there's a lot more plays that can be part of that playbook than we give ourselves credit for. And that it's not just, in fact, it's almost the opposite. When I think of Airbnb, one of my very favorite cult brands, it was their lack of knowledge about the hospitality business. Airbnb could never be started by a bunch of ex-Marriott executives.
Right.
It was their, oh, I didn't know that was a rule, or I didn't know that was how you're not supposed to do it, that allowed them to create something that became highly successful and desirable because they were curious, they were competent, and they were eager to build something that wasn't just, I'm going to make $1 billion company. The money became a means to the end. It wasn't why it existed to begin with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think one of the things that I would love to finish up on here is, what do you think? This is a big topic of everywhere right now. So what do you think about the AI tools that are being developed and AI with marketing? Is it helpful? Is it hurtful? Is it something that is inevitable and we just need to learn more about it? Do you think it's going to take people's jobs? What do you think about the whole AI space right now?
I'd say yes to every single question that you just asked. I'm actually kind of surprised at the, I get the novelty of it. It went from curious to kind of mainstream very quickly. Then the argument I care least about is it taking people's jobs.
Right.
Welcome to innovation. Electricity took people's jobs. The internet took people's jobs. The factory took people's jobs. Like I don't think that the goal is to suppress technology to preserve jobs. I think that we've learned that the thing that's the most agile thing that we've seen since the advent of time was human adaptability. Right. The tractor did not eliminate farmers. It allowed farmers to, plow more fields. And so I think that's, if you're doing something that is so easily replaceable by a machine, you should be changing what you're doing anyway, because why would people want to incur? We're seeing this now with tariffs, right? Like I have a couple of clients that are absolutely freaking out, but it was like, yeah, it made sense that you're going to go find the lowest possible way to produce something. Like that's just business. And so,
right.
Did China steal a bunch of American manufacturing jobs? Yeah, because people were like, I can get it made just as well for cheaper. That just seems smart to me. So if we decide as a society we want to preserve some jobs in America, I don't have a problem with that either. But that's just free market societies working themselves out. I just think that when I hire a carpenter to build my deck, I've never once said, you know what, before we get started, can you let me see what your hammer you're going to use? And I don't really like that drill saw. Can you use it? I just want the deck. Let him use whatever tools he's going to use. AI is just a tool that's in the marketer's toolbox. What I need is the outcome. And if they can find a way to get it done better, faster, cheaper, God bless them. But I'm not going to start selecting vendors on who uses Midjourney versus ChatGPT versus Perplexity. It's just another way to get something finished. So I'm not the best. I'm not the most sympathetic to all the freaking out that people are having about AI. I'm like, yeah, it seems like it's going to be a really nice new tool. It's not going to change what I do for a living. It's just going to change maybe how quickly I get some tasks completed.
Yeah, it's like how you do it. It's going to update workflows, which then allows you to do other things that are maybe more
important. It's going to give me more time. And now, sir, if I can get that blog written in 5 minutes instead of 30 minutes, man, that's amazing. Now I can write either more blogs or do something else with that time, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to stop writing blogs or, I feel like we're having a weird overreaction to tools that have been added to our toolbox.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and we thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's a great conversation, guys. Appreciate you. Best of luck to you.